A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks again for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. On the program today, we're going to talk with Mike Lynn, who made headlines last week in Lansing, Michigan, when he, his son, wife, several friends, ended up providing an armed escort for a Democrat state representative who said she felt intimidated by some of the armed protesters who had shown up at the state capitol in Lansing a few weeks ago as part of a reopen protest. Mike is a fairly new Second Amendment advocate and activist, although he's someone who, saw what was going on, said, if my representative is feeling scared, I want to make sure that she's got this protection. And it's fascinating to me because this is almost two sides of the same Second Amendment story. You've got armed protesters showing up at the Michigan State Capitol. Some lawmakers say they felt intimidated. As a result, some lawmakers are now calling for a ban on the carrying of firearms at the state capitol. The Michigan Capitol Commission has appointed a committee to investigate the issue. The state's attorney general says the Capitol Commission has the power to ban firearms from the Capitol if it chooses to do so. They are saying, actually, that they're not sure that that's the case. They would love to leave this up to lawmakers as opposed to taking that decision upon themselves. And in the meantime, we have another protest scheduled for Thursday in Lansing, Michigan. And it is quite possible that armed protesters, in fact, I'd say it's highly likely that you're going to see more armed protesters out there on Thursday in Lansing, Michigan, despite the fact that, as we reported yesterday at Bearing Arms, the protest organizers themselves are neutral on the issue. And I think they would love to be able to say, look, leave your guns at home, but it's legal to carry. It is legal to do this. And the organizer of this reopen protest, it's not a rally, it's a protest that'll be taking place tomorrow. Erica Pedinaro, she's one of the co-founders of Michigan United for Liberty, and she said that the group's never encouraged violence or that any protesters come to rallies with guns. While recognizing the Second Amendment rights of protesters, she said people do look at it as intimidating. Even some of our members are turned off. It's our constitutional right, so we can't stop people. But at the same time, we just want things to be peaceful. She says her group encourages people to protest, but she says don't be threatening. And don't be intimidating. What's interesting is, I guess, like beauty, intimidation is, I think, somewhat in the eyes of the beholder. But this is one of the things that we talked about with Mike Lynn. This was a fascinating conversation, and I'm really glad that Mike could sit down and talk with us to provide a sort of a different perspective. I mean, I'm a conservative. And I'm a gun owner and I'm a Second Amendment advocate, but I have repeatedly said on this program and over the years that the Second Amendment is not a right of the right. It is a right of the people. And so people I disagree with politically, in many cases, look, they've got the exact same right to keep and bear arms that I do. If someone, votes for a candidate that I don't support, or if somebody has positions that I don't hold, that doesn't mean that their Second Amendment rights are negated or diminished in any way, shape, or form. And so as a Second Amendment advocate, sometimes I have to, put my own personal politics aside and say, all right, we're going to talk to gun owners who I may disagree with politically, who I may not be on board with 100% of every issue, but we're going to find some common ground. And I think that Mike Lynn and I actually did that over the course of our conversation. Take a look and a listen. Mike, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Listen, we're going to get into everything going on in Lansing, Michigan, including the decision by the Capitol Commission on Monday to delay a vote on a possible gun ban at the Capitol. But, I reached out to you because you were one of the individuals who provided an armed escort to Sarah Anthony, state representative, who said that she was intimidated by some of the protesters that have shown up at the state capitol. I'm curious, what is the reaction been locally, and then we'll talk about the media reaction to you and other citizens, black and brown gun owners, carrying guns there on the Capitol grounds to protect the state representative?
The support has been phenomenal. I mean, when we did this, it just wasn't. We never thought that it was going to be like some type of some type of this huge explosion of media. It just never crossed our minds that was going to be what it is. It has been though. I mean, since that situation, it's been the Guardian. I mean, every publication and every media source you could think of outside of the main two. CNN reached out. We gave them an interview, but I haven't seen anything from it yet. I guess we didn't have enough sensationalism for them to be able to put it on. But it is what it is. I think it was the media attention was good for what we were attempting to do as far as change the narrative, and that was a byproduct of what we did. I mean, the intent was also obviously just to get her there, feel safe, but the byproduct of that was people want to know our story and why we decided to do it. So, pushing the Second Amendment to Black and brown people was obviously the byproduct message, and with the media catching it the way they did, I think it did well.
How long have you been a Second Amendment advocate? Did you grow up in a gun-owning family, or how did you get interested in this issue?
No, I mean, I grew up in the streets here in Lansing. I mean, I don't want to say the streets, but I grew up kind of rough here, and guns was always around, but I wasn't educated on guns in a legal standpoint. So we had guns around, and people had guns around us, and most times they were illegal weapons. And so I had an affinity to want to know more about guns. Always wanted a gun and to own guns and whatnot. Whether they were legal or not, at the point in time when I was way younger. I'm 38 now. I'm talking when I was in my teens, and so when I was old enough to own a gun, I actually went and had one. Well, actually, that's another part about this is educating our community, man. Like I was 18 years old. I think I was probably 21 when I finally had my first legal weapon. And I actually had my wife who's my wife now, my girlfriend, go buy it for me, even though I could have bought it myself. But it was like something that was ingrained in us that we don't want our names attached to something and so on. So I've always loved guns. I've always wanted to be, I always like shooting and so on and so forth. But to find out the legal aspect of it, that I have the right to have this. It's not a negative connotation when it comes to me owning one, although that's what people say, and I mean, I've had things like, even in my older age, I was 34, 35 years old, I think, and I posted a picture. Instagram had a thing where it was like, this gun is waiting, time is waiting on this gun to kill somebody, and it still hasn't done it. Like if you put your watch around your gun or whatever. And I posted a picture on my Facebook of my gun with a watch around it. And I had all this backlash from my job, and they're like, "What are you doing? You can't be posting pictures." I'm like, so that was when I started to realize like there's a double standard here. Because all the white boys that I work with could post pictures of their guns and turkeys and they're shooting dogs that they go with and everything was cool. But when I posted a picture of a gun, there was a negative tone to that, and I didn't like that. Even back then, that was 5-6 years ago. So then I decided like I would go against that norm, and I started posting more pictures and being more advocate towards all of us owning weapons legally. And I started to get my family involved with owning guns and getting everybody their CPL around me. And expressing them why it was so important. So that's just kind of how it started, as far as like the gun ownership aspect of it. But then I got educated on the Second Amendment recently. I mean, real recently, understanding why it's important to have it outside of just as far as outside of just self-defense. Because a lot of people don't understand that why we were given that, why we were so pressed about having that right. And especially for Black and brown people, I believe that they should understand why it's so important, because we can never be put back into slavery. And that may sound crazy to some people, but if you have a right to protect yourself, we got an upper hand on somebody who doesn't, if the government was ever to try to overreach that way. And that's something I never really looked at before until I started to dig deeper on the Second Amendment.
I mean, you're right. I mean, ultimately, the reason why we have the Second Amendment is to protect our lives and our freedom. And you go back to the debates over the ratification of the Bill of Rights and what some of the states were requesting. And I know that there's, still some folks who say, oh, this is only about a militia. I don't think so. I mean, you can go and you can read the 1776 Pennsylvania Constitution, and it's pretty clear. I mean, they make it explicitly clear that the right of the people to keep and bear arms in defense of themselves and the state, shall not be questioned. So there is a dual purpose here, right? It is about our individual right of self-defense. But, even reading like Federalist 43, I think it's Federalist 43 or Federalist 46. I always get those confused. James Madison writes about, well, what would happen if a tyrannical federal government actually, came into existence. And he writes about the body of the people capable of bearing arms with their state and local governments mounting a response. This is, whether it makes people uncomfortable or not, our right to keep and bear arms, I think, is rightfully seen not only as a means of self-defense, but also as a protection against the establishment of a tyrannical government.
Yeah, I agree, man. And like I said, I can't deny that fact. And I try to educate myself daily, just by talking to people that I wouldn't normally talk to, or somebody who may have a different perspective than me. And that's, if you ever watched our show, I don't know if you ever caught up with it, but that's kind of what we do. We kind of talk to people outside of the norm and find out what their perspective is. And through that process, I grow a lot and I learn a lot. And it challenges what I've always thought to be. And that's exactly it. We always think about gun ownership of self-defense from some robber that breaks in your house, but the chances of that happening, are pretty slim. But the government and the way the government's going, the chance of them trying to overstep is real possible right now. So that's something that I've just become awake to, as of recent. And,
Yeah.
So that's kind of really where I've had my awakening, is just through conversations just like this.
So, it's interesting, going back to the armed protests, in a way, that's why they were out there, armed or not. The protesters were protesting what they believed to be government overreach on the part of Governor Whitmer there in Michigan. And you had gone out to the state capitol, I guess, the day before the big protest that got a lot of media attention. And you said that you had actually talked with a gun owner who was out there when things were a little bit quieter.
Yeah, and I asked him, because this is where my awakening came to, the government aspect of being a Second Amendment advocate. And he just explained, anytime I go to a protest, and he was playing with me. He's like, I take my rifle with me so that they understand, like, this is here. And, we're willing to be diplomatic with you, but at the end of the day, this is always something that it could come to. He said that, I always bring it, obviously, for protection, because he doesn't want to be ran over. And when you look at, like, the Black Lives Matter movement and us out here, protecting ourselves or protesting against police brutalities and so on, and then you see the aftermath of some of these protests where they've maced, sprayed, beat, just peaceful protesters. Now, that's our First Amendment right. We should have all the right in the world to express that. But if we don't have the Second Amendment there to protect that first, this is where you see these outcomes. And so it really drove home with me when I was like, wow, man, like, you're right. It does level the playing field. They have to understand that there's not just the power struggle is now going to be between the both of us. It's equal. There's no longer you standing over me and I have to submit. And so, like, when he was expressing that to me, I was like, wow, I can kind of gauge why you would think that that's important, at that moment. So that's why I say it, on a daily awakening.
And then the next day, when the bigger protests took place, I know again that some lawmakers said that they were intimidated or afraid of the armed protesters, some of their messages, and that's why you decided that you wanted to provide that armed escort to Representative Anthony.
Yeah, I think so. Like, this has kind of been a statement or a position that people kind of don't understand. It's like, well, are you for it or are you against it? Like, you're allowing and you're escorting somebody inside the building who may go in there and vote against you, to have that right. And I can't explain it to anybody unless you're in the position to understand it. Sarah Anthony is the first Black female to be, and the youngest Black female to ever have that position of state representative for this city. And at the end of the day, we voted her in and elevated her from just a local citizen as well as us, graduated high school from here, went on to college, came back out and wanted to represent her city that she grew up and born and raised in. We voted for her and elevated her for many other reasons. 2A wasn't on the table. This wasn't even a thought process. So there's a whole lot of other things that go on in our lives that are more important, and in the majority aspect of thought process than the 2A. And on top of that fact, what a lot of people don't know is Sarah Anthony actually is a 2A advocate. She has her own CPL she carries. So, that wasn't really the thought in that aspect. I decided that, the Second Amendment right is ours, is to do what we want with it. So at the end of the day, I decided I was going to use mine to make sure that person we elevated was going to be able to get in there and speak for us as a people.
And what was her reaction when you reached out?
She was indifferent with it at the beginning. She did explain to me that she was nervous and she was worried about the protests and the people that were out there. And I want to explain that too. And I don't want to get off topic of this question, but I want to explain why these people would be nervous and upset or worried. We have to understand that it's not always our intent. It's kind of like what is the outcome of what the situation was. And when you have a group of angry people out here that are screaming, yelling, and hollering, and they look the suspect apart. Now we can all look. People can look at. We talked about this, and we talked about like, look in the description, right? And if I'm breaking in my window at my own home and I live in a white neighborhood, I'm going to fit the description of a burglary suspect. Everybody has their biases, right? And I'm not to say we don't have our own, and it's not intended biases, but it's biases that have come along with living and things that we are indoctrinated through the media and so on. So anyways, when you have that crowd of all a bunch of white men out there, and then you have it doesn't even have to be everybody have a Confederate flag. It can be one. It can be one Nazi flag. It could be one noose. That's all it takes to turn that whole group spoiled. And so when you have that whole group that now is spoiled in a black woman's mind, she knows they're on the opposite side of the aisle, and then they are being really aggressive, and then they have those weapons. I mean, anybody that's going to be in their right mind is going to be a little nervous in that situation who's not having these type of conversations, right? She's not having these conversations with those people. Those are not her people that are voting for her or talking to her. So all she's hearing is death threats, all of these things going on. And so that's why she felt the way she did. So that's really why I wanted to express that, that's why the feeling was there. So when I contacted her, she expressed all of that to me, that she was worried about all those things. And I told her, we were having just a one-on-one conversation. And I told her, I said, I don't have no problem bearing arms to come down there and escort you. And, she was like, oh, that sounds so amazing. I'd appreciate that thought process, but I don't know that I want to, I don't want to go that route. Like, I don't want to be a hypocrite because I don't want guns in the Capitol. But then at the same time, I do want to feel safe. So it was like this period of purgatory where we didn't really know what we were going to do with this thing. And then after that, it came to be that I kind of kept on her because I was like, I just don't want you to feel like you can't be, go to work safe and whatnot. And then it kind of like, she kind of just was like, you know what, if you guys are already going to be there, I don't have a problem with you escorting me. And so we were already going to be there to make sure that whoever wanted to go back and forth was going to be fine. Obviously with her in mind specifically, but it was more or less a situation like that.
So as I said a couple of minutes ago, the Capitol Commission had a meeting yesterday. There was some thinking beforehand that they were going to vote on a possible gun ban at the Capitol. Instead, they decided to set up a committee that's going to look into the issue. They'll report back next week. But in the meantime, sounds like we've got another protest scheduled for Thursday. Are you planning on going to the state capitol at all this week? Will you be there on Thursday?
Not unless we're expressly asked to be. So I'm not going to go up there under the same circumstances that we're just going to wait to see if somebody needs to be escorted. We put our services out there. We told people that we're willing to volunteer. So if anybody's still scared and doesn't know that they have that help out there, then then that's one thing. But for the most part, there's been multiple people that contacted us from the state representative's office saying that they as soon as they contacted us, put out into the world that they didn't feel safe. We contacted them to let them know our services were available, and we haven't heard a response. So at the end of the day, they're on their own on that one. We did everything we can possibly do. So,
have you heard from many other local gun owners? I think there were there were 6 of you, escorting Representative Anthony. Have you heard from others saying, "Hey, I want to be a part of this if you do this again"?
It's crazy. We started a group. Called Black and Brown Second Amendment Advocates. And it had 19 people in it, all just local people that I knew. I had put out a post on Facebook, and I was holding my AR, and I was just like, after this happened, I was like, I need all my Second Amendment, my Black and Brown Second Amendment, and all my non-POC or allies, white people that are allies. So I need all of y'all who carry to get a hold of me. And through that process, I got like 19 people that hit me up and wanted to be involved. And so we created this group. And after we did this, out of that group, 19 people, it was my son, my wife, myself, my nephew, and 2 other people that I'd already had dealings with. After that, this thing blew up to 510 people
Whoa.
from all over the country. So we got people from California, Idaho, I mean everywhere. And so um, from that group I've met, I mean, so before this, mind you, Second Amendment advocate, but not involved with any NRAs or NAAGA or USCC. No, I'm not involved with any of that, right? I didn't know
Right.
any of the stuff that existed. Gun clubs, we talked about the the feeling of going into an all white gun club, as a black man. I didn't know that there's black gun clubs. I didn't know that there's black gun club shooting ranges. I didn't know any of this stuff. So through this process, I mean, the resources that we found black and brown gun dealers, black and brown clubs, shooting ranges. I mean, all of this stuff has come out of this group, man. It's been crazy, the response.
That's awesome. I wish that I don't just wish. I'm going to introduce you to some folks because there are some great gun owners that I've had a chance to meet over the years. There's a guy named Tony Simon who lives in New Jersey. He hosts it's called a diversity shoot at a range in Woodland Park, about 15 miles from New York City. And I think you would be really into this, Mike, because again, it's leave all of the baggage at the door, right? Leave your political affiliation, leave your, personal thoughts behind. When you come here, you're going to be surrounded by Second Amendment advocates, some of whom may look just like you, some of whom may look absolutely nothing like you, but you all come together with that one purpose of, getting together and shoot and have a good time, getting to know one another. And I've always felt like the Second Amendment is probably the biggest tent movement that we have in this country. We love to slice and dice and divide us up in every imaginable way possible. Right. But this is a right that's a right for all of us. It's not a right for the right. It's not a right for white people. This is a right of the people. And I think the more the people exercise that right, I think the better off, we all are going to be as a country. But I think the more we're going to be able to kind of come together and we're not always going to agree on every issue. But we don't necessarily have to be at each other's throats on every issue either. And I think that finding that common ground, even if it's, the common ground of the Second Amendment, I think that helps us do that.
Man, I'll tell you what, and this is what I've noticed, and again, this is me just my head ballooning with information and knowledge, new knowledge, is that I've noticed that there is no color line when it comes to the Second Amendment. There is no, let me say this plain, because a lot of people misconstrue things that my experience is theirs, but my experience is, and I had a very interesting conversation that I'll tell you about in a second, but my experience is that everybody does leave it at the door when it comes to the Second Amendment. And you'll notice some people that you may not ever believe would want you to have a gun, and exercise your Second Amendment. And so I've realized that just over the last week, that when it comes to the Second Amendment, that's something we all gonna ride for. So they may not ride for me to take a knee on the national anthem. They may not agree with me and Colin Kaepernick or whatever. But when it comes to the Second Amendment, it's like, all right, now you guys went too far with this shit, and they're down. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously, That's kind of how I feel about the Second Amendment and this is why my mind works on levels where I'm like, how can we capitalize off of that to change the world that we live in? Because we do all understand that black and white, Mexican, whatever the case is, when it comes to gun ownership, it seems like we all can come together and shoot and have a good time. We may leave and say, I can't stand this guy. But while we were shooting, it was like nobody was paying attention to affiliations or whatever the case is. So when I tell you the conversation I had was with Phil Richardson, who is the Michigan Liberty Militia leader or whatever it is. And he's been having a lot of press from this same scenario because they were the militia who were there on that Thursday. And I started to research this guy because, again, I want to know about the people that I hear are, crazy, racist, white supremacists. And he's been involved with some things that are very sketchy. And we don't, like security for certain groups that have come here. And it seems like the majority of the groups that come here are white supremacist groups or some type of fascist group. So I reached out and talked to the promoter or I guess organizer of the protest to get his phone number. So anyways, at the end of the day, I ended up talking to this guy on the phone, man. Just seemed like to me, again, this is my experience with him, a normal guy, cool dude. I mean, he said that this is what his take was to me, that he's just about the rights of the people, plain and simple, no matter what color you are, so on and so forth. So that was my experience with him. And I talked to him, I was like, man, it's crazy what we could do if we could present that to the media. And the media couldn't keep pushing this, this narrative that we're all against each other, want to kill each other through the Second Amendment, like you said, a tenth over all of us. Wow, man! Like how many? I don't know if you've ever seen American X, and the guy that killed two black people came out of prison and decided he wanted to change his life, and he didn't like the. It's like, so what we could do with this nation by coming together and uniting under this one, umbrella that engulfs everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to think on that level, man, and it's not about division, and that's where we're going with everything. And we're really tense right now with racial issues. Every time you look at the media, man, it's black people are being hunted, and white people are dismissive of the situation. And I'm not saying that that's not true in some form or fashion, but what can we do, instead of just realizing that we're all at war, to fix it?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, and you're right. And I think that again, I think some of it is, I talk about leaving baggage behind. I think some of it is we all bring our own baggage, right? We all bring our own history, and you talk about you're trying to get in your door at night, and someone's gonna think that, okay, well, here's a black guy trying to break into a house. I mean, honestly, depending on what neighborhood we're in, if you and I were talking on the street, people might think, oh God, there's that redneck harassing, Mike. Yeah. And right. So you're right. I mean, we all have that baggage. The thing is, I mean, I think the real difference maker is you have to want to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Right. And if you don't want to make a difference, if you're just out there shouting to get attention, if you're just out there making noise for the sake of making noise, I mean, okay, you got the right to do that, and I'll defend your right to do that. Right. But I don't think that's effective. I don't think that's necessarily worthwhile. Just shouting to get attention. I'm a fan of the difference makers, and what you, I think, are starting to tap into is a mindset within the Second Amendment community. I think it's a big one. That yes, we really can use this common experience and this right that we all possess as individuals. To start to have these conversations, to start to build these alliances, to start to break down some of these divisions that the media or politicians or even each other put up. I mean, I think that I think you're on the right path, Mike. I really do, and I appreciate you coming on the program with me and talking about this. What is so where do you want to go next with this? I mean, it sounds like you are kind of immersing yourself into learning more about the Second Amendment right now. Do you think you'll be doing that for the foreseeable future?
Where do I want to go next? To the shooting range, man. It's like 60 degrees out here. I didn't need to open that shit up. But honestly, man, I just had to get in this group and have this conversation earlier today because a byproduct of me doing this is that everybody's like, "What's next, Mike?" And so I've got 500 people from all over the country asking me, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to create a militia? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And it's like, just hold up, man. Like, I think really what I would like to do is just change the narrative, first of all, like I've been trying to do. Is that it's okay for us to own. It's okay for us to own legally. Outside of that, it's more or less like education. Having fun with it, man. Like, it's fun as hell to shoot. Like, go out and pop off 150 rounds. Like, what? That's the fun of it. Like, let's look at gun ownership that way as well. Educating people on what I've learned, because again, I'm 38 years old, and I just now learned really what the Second Amendment was meant for, and I'm understanding how to practically put that into my life. So if I can educate people at a younger age, they don't have to go through 20 years of not understanding this, and they can learn at 18 why it's important. So the education aspect, and I kind of do that in a lot of my life. I've learned a lot of lessons through the world. Just walking through the world, I kind of people taught me as like the slumdog millionaire of Lansing. Like, I just know things for whatever reasons because I lived through it, and so and I learned things through trial and error. And if I can give that information back to somebody, they don't have to go through what I went through. So when you talk about where I'm going with this, that's it, man. It's just educating people so they don't have to catch that felony for carrying concealed when they didn't need to. They could have went and got their CPL. Like that type of stuff, because there's a lot of things that happen in somebody's life that are chain reactions. They catch that CPL felony and they're for carrying concealed weapon, and then next thing you know, now they're out here living reckless, and their whole life is trashed because of this one silly situation. So if I can educate my people on the importances of legally Second Amendment right, carrying guns, that would be one of the main things. Outside of that is organizing. Organizing people. Like I talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, they need a security force, if at all. they need somebody who can level the playing field when they're out here in those situations to keep the First Amendment protected. So I think that that's something that needs to happen. I mean, there's a lot of those things that just talking with people and working your mind about the position you're in, that things come up. So I don't know exactly where we're going to go with everything, but I am immersed in it now by choice and by just positional stance. So.
Well, we're gonna stay in touch if you don't mind. I really appreciate you coming on the program, and I'd love to follow where your path takes you. And again, I appreciate you spending some time with me today, Mike.
I appreciate you, man. Make sure you come check out America 20 to Life, brother.
America 20 to Life. Where can we find that? All of the major podcast platforms?
I'm on, all the majors. So you got Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram.
Fantastic. I will do so. Mike Lynn, thank you so much, man. It's great talking with you today. Hope we get a chance to do this again soon.
All right. Appreciate it, brother.
So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation with Mike. As I said on Bearing Arms yesterday, regarding the protests in Michigan on Thursday, again, it is your right to carry. And I will defend that right. I believe that the right to carry at the Michigan State Capitol should exist. However, if I'm advising some of the armed protesters who have shown up, keep in mind that it appears at the moment that you're creating more enemies than allies, or at least turning off some folks who ostensibly are on your side. It is less of a political statement to make, but I would probably carry concealed. If I wanted to make that political statement, I might even have a T-shirt that says, yes, I'm carrying a gun. But I think that you've got to be creative. You also have to be cognizant of the purpose of these protests and what it is that you're trying to achieve. If you're out there just trying to get attention, well, I mean, carry a gun. Be as outrageous as you can possibly be. Get your signs calling Governor Whitmer a Nazi and everything else, and you'll get press attention. But if you're trying to make an impact, if you're trying to influence not just the lawmakers inside of the Capitol, but the people of Michigan, who, according to recent polls, believe them or not, politicians believe these polls. Governor Whitmer right now has something like a 72% approval rating. And something like 3/4 of the state residents say, no, we're fine with keeping things locked down for the moment. Those are the folks that you're trying to persuade. Not just the lawmakers inside the state Capitol, but everybody watching at home. And in order to do that, again, I offer up a couple of suggestions at Bearing Arms to engage in the type of outreach and influence operation that I think could be successful at changing hearts and minds. But again, you got to be cognizant of the media environment. You've got to be cognizant of where a majority, according to polls, where a majority of Michiganders land right now on this issue. And you've got to be smart and tactically sound in the decisions that you make. Simple as that. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We will start there out of Taos, New Mexico, where a felon accused of shooting at a neighbor is going to remain behind bars after he was let loose just a short time ago for an aggravated battery case. Last week, Roland Cisco was ordered held in jail until trial on a case of trying to shoot and kill his neighbor. Yeah, he's now charged with attempted first-degree murder, shooting at or from a motor vehicle, possession of a firearm by a felon, as well as tampering with a motor vehicle. According to a statement of probable cause, the 29-year-old admitted to a sheriff's deputy that he had fired at least one shot at his neighbor back on April 24th. He also asked a family member to turn in the rifle that he said that he used to shoot at his neighbor, John Chrisman. Detective said the state would take into consideration his cooperation while prosecuting the new charges. Chrisman had told a sheriff's deputy that he had complained to Cisco in the past about shooting guns near his home. Other neighbors in the area also told the deputy that they commonly heard gunshots in the neighborhood, didn't specify whether they were fired by Cisco. So apparently there's been a little neighborhood dispute here. The fact that Cisco is a convicted felon, probably not a wise idea to be shooting on or near his property where neighbors can hear you when you're not legally allowed to own that firearm. Back on April 17th, Cisco pleaded guilty to a charge of aggravated battery resulting in great bodily harm. So about a week before he's accused of shooting at his neighbor. In that case, According to Taos News, the DA's office suspended a 3-year prison sentence and granted Cisco probation. He also has another prior felony conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for a case filed in November of 2016. And he has a pending meth trafficking case in New Mexico State Court as well. Why on earth a violent repeat felon was granted probation in this case is absolutely beyond me. Maybe it was because of the coronavirus concerns. We got to keep folks out of jail to help mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. But look, we were told that that's only happening to nonviolent offenders or individuals who have just a short time left on their sentence, so they're letting them out, a couple of weeks or maybe a month early. That's not the case with Mr. Cisco here. Here we have a convicted felon, convicted of violent crimes, pleads guilty to another violent crime, subject to a term in prison, and instead slap on the wrist, sent on his way, and now a week later he's back behind bars, will be held there until trial because he allegedly committed another violent crime. So there you go. That's the definition of a recidivist right there. Our armed citizen story of the day, Union County, South Carolina. WSPA reporting that a man killed early Tuesday morning during a home invasion. According to the Union County Sheriff David Taylor, officers responded to a reported shooting just after midnight on the 1200 block of Main Street there in Union County, South Carolina. Apparently, the ex of the homeowner had shown up, kicked in the front door, and started shooting. Suspect, 26-year-old Victor Hare, the homeowner's ex-boyfriend. Inside the home, Hare's ex-girlfriend, an adult male, a 10-year-old, and a 2-year-old. According to WSPA, when the shooting began, the woman ran outside the home, ran over to a neighbor's, and was screaming, "Please help, I need 911. He's here, and he's got a gun." Sheriff Taylor says that the couple had been in a relationship. We had answered a domestic call over here a few days ago. He said that we had active warrants out for this suspect, Victor Hare. He also said that another man in the home fired back at Hare in self-defense. When crews arrived on the scene, Hare was found lying in the front yard. He later passed away from his injuries. Police are still investigating, but they say that no charges will be filed as the man who shot Victor Hare was acting in self-defense. So thankfully, again, this story ended with none of the victims hurt and the would-be intruder deceased. All right, on to our good deed of the day from Potsdam, New York, where a Potsdam student has gone above and beyond to help an injured police officer there in the area, Logan McCarger, that's him on the right, for his senior project at Potsdam High. He created over 60 wooden flags in honor of Blue Lives Matter. Logan McCarger is the son of Sean McCarger, who works for the St. Lawrence County Sheriff's Office. Teresa McCarger is a New York State police officer. And Logan decided that he was going to donate all of the profits from these wooden flags that he made to that gentleman on the left, David LeBeau, who is a police officer injured in the line of duty. I think that is absolutely fantastic. Don't know how much money was raised there, but if you're a high school student, you could always use a little extra cash, right? Instead, Logan in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing for a local police officer injured in the line of duty. And Logan, we thank you, sir, for your very, very good deed. That is all the time that we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Want to thank you for being a part of the program again, as always. Also want to thank those of you who are VIP members of Bearing Arms or VIP Gold members of Town Hall Media. You can sign up at BearingArms.com or any of the Town Hall Media sites like Town Hall, Hot Air, Red State, Twitchy, Pajamas Media. And when you do so, you get exclusive commentary, analysis, live chats, and more. We certainly do appreciate all of your support that allows us to continue doing the Second Amendment journalism we do here each and every day. Until we talk again, be safe, be well, be free, and we'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.